Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim and Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. You are in tune to The Talk Show. We're discussing today the issue of race, racism in the wider society and in the Muslim community. I have with me an esteemed panel, and I'll start in no particular order, but if I can ask Brother Andrew to introduce himself to the listeners.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, brother and sister. This is Brother Ghulam Bogans here, otherwise known as Andrew X. And so I've been a community activist, as it were, in terms of having an Islamic, working in the Islamic community for a number of years, over 30 years now. I've been around the Khoja community and the Shia community in terms of the Pakistani community, the Iranian community as well, around about that same number. And I also have a social enterprise in which I work with young people, which is not an Islamic organization, but I work with young people with anti-gang things and knives. So kind of in the community, and this hot issue of racism in the wider community, the Islamic community, is something that's very much that I work in. Okay, that's me finished.
All right, and next up we have Brother Simon. Could you say just a line about yourself or two? Who you are and what you do?
Assalamu alaikum. My name's Simon. I'm a legal professional. I've been a Muslim for nearly exactly 10 years now. So I've got a particular handle on the particular issues affecting the convert community and their relationships with both Khojas and Iraqis, Iranians, and a particular insight into the mix and interactions of those communities.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you. Brother, Assalamu alaikum, Brother Rizwan.
Alaikum salam. How are you?
Good, alhamdulillah.
Assalamu alaikum to everyone. And alaikum salam. My name is Rizwan Ali-Bai, and I have been working particularly in interfaith community work in South London for, I think, over 30 years now. And I've been organizing various interfaith events in the Hydery Centre in Streatham and other places in South London where we've had people from other faith communities, as well as a lot of people who have become reverts or converts to Islam. I work very much at the grassroots level, and we organize an interfaith, virtual interfaith iftar in Ramadan this year. So we do a host of activities, and I try to work towards a more inclusive mosque community at Hydery, in and around Hydery in Streatham. Thank you.
Okay, that's excellent, 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 excellent. So Brother Ghulam, I believe you have an important clip, a soundbite that you'd like to play that we can kind of formulate our remarks and our discussion around.
This is the actual. So what we're looking at is there was a discussion around looking at in the Islamic community, particularly in the Shia community, here located in London, England. And there was a discussion, I believe, on a Facebook page. One of the sheikhs, who was a African sheikh, a black sheikh, made a comment. It's a small clip in which he outlined his experience, and it was about his experience of racism. And then in the particular community, in the Khoja community, in general as a Muslim, but he, as the scholar of the Khoja community in Birmingham, I think the people in Birmingham who represents that community felt that he went a little bit too far in his condemnation of racism, and it seemed to tar them with a brush. So there was a reaction from members, not particularly of that Birmingham community, but generally the Khoja community. Some of the members took it upon themselves to react to his statement, which we're going to play now, which you can hear for yourself. And then I believe Brother Rizwan will read the statement by the community. But before we go into that, I'll play the statement so we can all hear it for ourselves.
With anyone, you get undermined. You know, look at all Shia communities, Iranian communities. suffered that in the hand of some Iranians. They look at your color and they scream. Khojas. I've gone to so many Khoja communities. Alhamdulillah, personally, I'm highly respected, but that's not the end of it all. There are racist people amongst soldiers. Recently, one gentleman in Birmingham, you know, we had to travel with him somewhere for something before the lockdown. He enjoyed his company, and I told him, he said, no, Sheikh, I enjoyed your company more than me. But can I tell you something? The first time your name was announced that you were coming to become our resident alim, one day we were standing outside before you arrived in the UK. I was standing with some of my colleagues, and one of them said, he's going to lead us. He said, from that day, I stopped talking to that guy.
Alhamdulillah.
So black person is going to lead us. How? So I told him, no, just go back to the person, talk to him, maybe he's ignorant. So we have racism within the Khoja communities, without a shadow of doubt. Pakistanis, yes. And this begins with our ulamas. We must call a spade a spade. Yes, we condemn what is happening in America. Without a shadow of doubt, the brutal killing of Floyd. But you condemning and doing nothing in your backyard is a waste of time. It's pointless. Pakistanis, we have racism. Iraqis, our own ulamas. Alhamdulillah, I will say, we are privileged. Some of us, myself, maybe Abdul Rauf, Sister Rebecca, Sheikh Ahmed Ali, we are privileged, alhamdulillah. But our people are suffering. I've not lived with Afghanis a lot, so I cannot say much about them. We heard about marriage. Allahu Akbar. Even if you are Malaika, most of these communities, so long as you are black, they will hesitate to give their daughter to you. Let's call a spade a spade. There is jahiliyyah of racism within Shia communities before we even go to Sunni communities.
That's the end of the tape. Powerful.
Okay. So brother Ridwan, I believe you have some. Could you pause that sound for us, the audio?
You want me to put a pause, is it?
No, sorry. It was Ghulam that was playing the clip, repeating the clip. So I could just ask him just to hold that clip. As tantalizing and sizzling as it was, if you could just hold that clip, and can I bring you in, Rizwan, just to read some of the feedback that's been made in reference to the official feedback. Sheikh Nur's remarks last night.
Okay, yeah, I must first of all announce a disclaimer that I'm not officially representing any of the official Khoja Shia Muslim organizations. I'm not a representative. Whatever I contribute is in my own individual capacity and as an observer. And the comment that I have received has got no name on it. So again, I don't know who has made that comment.
So he or she shall remain nameless.
Yes,
but the content shall be revealed.
But however, so it's not a comment from an official comment from any of the Khoja institutions. So that must be very clear at the beginning.
Crystal clear.
However, the issues raised, some of the issues raised are valid, and it's necessary that as communities we should debate, discuss, and devise ways on how to move forward. This is more important. So this is a response that I received, and I also, before I start reading it, I actually watched the whole, most of the documentary, and while we've only heard a short video clip from Sheikh Nur, actually it was quite a good documentary with various contributions giving different aspects of the systemic racism and the solutions moving forward. And within the context in which Sheikh Nur expressed himself, I thought that his comments actually were relevant. So I begin now, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. And this is what the message says. Can you hear me clearly? Yeah.
Yes.
Perfectly, Brother, perfectly.
Okay, yeah.
Crystal.
As many of us have seen, Sheikh Nur Muhammad recently spoke candidly about racism within Shia communities, singling some of them out by name. He mentioned Iranians, Iraqis, Pakistanis, and more importantly, Khojas as being plagued with the problem of racism. While his message was heartfelt, there are some rejoinders that need to be made in the spirit of fairness. One, singling out communities in this way is not fair, as racism is a social phenomenon that can be witnessed in all our societies. We have seen black racism against Asians and Indians in East Africa and other places as well. Therefore, mentioning specific community is an unfair generalization. Racism is better defined as a problem in some individuals rather than in communities. Two, hesitation in giving one's daughter in marriage to another race is not a correct gauge for racism. It is completely fair to think about cultural differences and the undue burden it would place on the newlyweds. While some people can handle that pressure, not everyone can. A man might hesitate to give his daughter to a white man just as much as he would to a black man, simply because he wants someone of the same cultural background and ethnicity. That is not racism. Three, the discourse at present is focused on the brutal killing of George Floyd in the United States, which has shown a light on the age-old problem of brutal oppression and racism against black people in America. Killing, maiming, and manhandling black people cannot be compared to snideful racist remarks or facial expressions of contempt, which is seen in many of the racist encounters in the communities around the world. Calling a certain race by a derogatory term is racism, but in the end they are words only. How can that form of racism be compared with killing people simply because of the color of the skin? Just 1 second here.
Is that in essence, Brother Ridwan? Only because I'm aware of the time.
Yeah, just one more point. One more point.
Okay,
and that's it.
okay.
Yeah. Sheikh Nur has benefited a lot from the Khoja Shia international Muslim community, just as the community has benefited a lot from him. We may have some racist members like any other community in the world, including within the black community, but we gave the Sheikh a platform, made him our Imam, and continue to consider him an authority in religious matters. That shows growth in a positive direction. This positive growth is what needs to be highlighted and nurtured, and that can only be done in the spirit of positive advice, not negative ascriptions. May Allah guide us all. Thank you for listening.
Excellent. Okay. Very interesting comments. I have my own opinion, but I guess I'm anchor today in the capacity of anchor. So what I will do is I will pass the mic to Brother Simon before I come back to you, Ridwan, and then go on to Ghulam. So Simon, some feedback. Give us a context, give us a visceral feeling, give us something.
On that statement?
Yes. The video and the remarks.
Well, I also listened to that documentary yesterday, and what struck me from it, one of the issues that struck me from it was an insufficient understanding of what racism is. One of the comments that one of the made yesterday was, well, I haven't been verbally abused, I haven't been physically assaulted by members of the Shia community, therefore I don't consider myself to be racially prejudiced. But that doesn't really address what racism is. Racism is any sort of disadvantage. I'm sure we have all our own definitions, but to me, it can be much more covert than obvious aggression, and that's the problem within the community. It's to say, well, you know, we're not racist because we don't abuse people doesn't go anywhere near towards solving the problem. And I think there's a sort of cognitive dissonance between saying things like, well, you know, if I don't offer my hand in marriage to a black or white person, that doesn't mean I'm racist. Isn't really self-critical enough. It's not asking, well, why aren't you prepared to offer your hand in marriage? What problems does it cause within the community of Oxford? Why does it cause a social disgrace with talking it's a sort of false dichotomy in the argument.
Okay, so you're cutting out your volume. Maybe just
If you could speak a little bit louder, Simon. But I'm following you. But if you could speak a little bit louder, because this is getting recorded and will be published.
Yeah, well, I don't know how much was cutting out. But what I was basically saying was, it's not enough simply to say it's not racist not to offer my daughter hand in marriage, because it would involve X or Y problem. But it's not self-critical enough. It's not asking the question, well, why would it be a social disgrace for such and such a person to offer their daughter's hand in marriage to a black or a white person?
If I could just jump in on that point, Simon, because I'm aware of time, but that is something that comes up. The marriage issue does come up quite a bit, and this what sounds like to me a defensiveness. Use the term false dichotomy, but a kind of defensiveness where it's really about cultural issues. But knowing that black people, white people, Asian people, all different backgrounds, young people in particular, go to university, often listen to the same type of music, are into the same sort of fashion and street culture and youth culture. I find it quite interesting because somebody is from a Pakistani background and somebody's from a black or white background, that they would be the same people that went to school would be so alien because they're Muslim, and they're both Muslims. But it'd be so alien and so complex that I would have to decline my daughter's hand in marriage because, to culturally navigate, it might be so challenging. I find that flabbergasting.
And then what's the point in saying, you hear all these lines such as, there's no difference in Islam between a black and a white person apart from their piety. Well, why isn't that applied to an argument about who should who? It seems to be all lip service to me. And it's
rhetoric.
And these things are just spouted out as a way of sort of making people feel better. It's a bit like, the defensive statement, oh, well, Bilal called the adhan, therefore, the Prophet must, Islam must be a religion of equality.
It's all inclusive, right? Because Bilal called the adhan and he was black.
Yeah, it's just a comfort blanket. It's something that's there to make people feel better about their prejudices or to mask them in some way. And we ought to remove all these sorts of shibboleths. That's what they are.
Okay. Excellent point. I'm going to bring in Brother Ridwan. There was a general comment from the Sheikh. There was a feedback from some members of the community, but also just want to throw into the mix to you, Brother Ridwan, the idea that it seemed to be implicit in that statement as if the person making the remarks was sort of centering a narrative as if there was this lynching, this brutal murder of this black man in America. That is racism. This KKK style killing of anti-blackness is racism. But anything less than that is really not a kind of non-event. If it's to do with marriage, if it's to do with social exclusion, if it's to do with people feeling ostracized or left out, or other kind of complexities in human interactions, that doesn't really qualify. I mean, there's lynching, that is racism. The implicit that using the N-word is racism, but other than that, I mean, it's pretty plain sailing, isn't it?
First thing to clarify that we have to make a clear distinction between what Islam teaches and what are passed as community norms, however they are acquired, whether they're acquired through cultural prejudices or through education or through ignorance or through bad habits, whatever, or apathy. So there is a combination of factors that, and this is important to make a distinction. There's undoubtedly, I think Islamic teaching on racism is very clear, on inequality it is very clear, and we have plenty of examples from the life of the Prophet and from the Ahlul Bayt. So there's no doubt about it, that we should endeavor to work towards racial equality and elimination of racial prejudices within our communities. Having said that, yes, I think that as they often say, that the oak tree came from a small acorn. Yes. So these small things do matter. Our language does matter. Our attitude does matter, because that is what informs our prejudices. And the result of a racial killing is actually a culmination of a collection of attitudes of prejudices over a period of time. So, which is why you can say what happened to Floyd. Some people say that he was, he was a criminal or he was committing alleged crime. But the fact remains that a white police officer put a knee on his neck for 9 minutes, and the guy was unarmed, and he begged to be allowed to breathe, and he was not allowed. So obviously there's something underlying that is informing what is happening there. And it is right that we, as a Muslim community who are supposed to, especially people who believe in the Prophet and Ahlul Bayt, we are supposed to have elevated standards of equality, justice, and so forth, that we aspire to higher norms of behavior. And I think I do agree when Sheikh Nur said we should, this time we call a spade a spade. If there are extra prejudices, then the preachers who preach from the pulpit need to take those issues up and also advise the community to reform. After all, what was the whole message of Karbala about? What was the message of Imam Hussein? Why did he stand up against the iniquities of Yazid? What was the whole point? What is the whole point that every year we gather in Muharram in our mosques and we commemorate the injustice done upon him, and yet we stand aside when the injustice is happening within our own communities every day? So it's not acceptable, and the people who have the puppets have the most responsibility. They should use the puppet to educate people and to eliminate these kind of social ills that we have. There should be no problem if a black man is more pious than an Asian man, that he should be able to, he should be considered for marriage to an Asian daughter or whatever. There shouldn't be any barriers. And in fact, I was just reflecting on these things yesterday, and I just remembered that in my own extended family, I had actually an uncle who was a child, who was a grandchild, whose grandmother was an African lady, and his grandfather was an Indian Khoja. So only, this is probably maybe about 70 odd years ago, it was actually, these interracial marriages did happen in East Africa, even in the East African context. So I don't know why there are people who are forgetting these things or not being reminded of these things, that actually there were interracial marriages between Asians and blacks. When the first Indian Khojas came in East Africa, I think in the early 1900s, at that time, they did intermarry. Some of them took on African wives. And then they had children from that, and they intermarried. So these things have happened. They have happened. So it's nothing. It's nothing unusual, and it shouldn't be unusual. And we need to move forward. This is most important.
We need to move forward. Excellent. I'm going to jump in there. Brother,
Bilal, you sound really bad.
Yeah.
Al-Hajj, Ali, yeah, yo.
Right. So I'm gonna stay. You heard the video.
Dalek, you sound like a Dalek.
Oh, okay. Make your point. Make your points.
Okay. Okay. Mashallah. Assalamu alaikum wa barakatuh. Well, can I just pick up on what I've heard so far? And I'm just gonna be, you know me. I'm just gonna speak of my heart from my mind, and just put it out there, and make it plain. Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim wa sallallahu alaihi Muhammad. For me, first of all, I'd like to say it's interesting that Sheikh Nur did name 3 communities. I think he meant the Iranians, Pakistanis, and Khoja. So it's interesting that the Khojas were the first one to yelp. So it makes me wonder, why did the Khojas, the Iranians didn't have an issue with it, Pakistanis didn't seem to have an issue, but yet the Khojas were the ones that jumped up. So is that some unbiased racism going on there in themselves? I think it's disingenuous to say, we gave you this platform we put you here, so you should be grateful. So it's a bit like in slavery with the slave master in the slave house saying, I put you from the field Negro into the big house. You should be grateful you're in the big house now and no longer in the field with the rest of the Negroes. You know, I brought you in here to make you play the fiddle, to amuse me. And now you're actually saying, I don't like the fact that you guys are treating me with disrespect. If he's speaking from his heart, if he's been honest and open, that should be welcomed by the community. Yes, this is not an official statement. Yes, we know it's not the actual, all Khojas are not the same like this. But still, the idea that somehow a community has to be racist and the individuals, the individuals are somehow racist, but the community isn't. The community is made up of the individuals. So it's ridiculous and it's incredulous for anyone to think, oh, well, it's okay for me to call somebody as a name and be derogatory to that person. But if I don't put my knee on their neck, somehow that's not as bad. It's unacceptable on any level. And racism in this country defined, if you insult somebody verbally, it is seen as a racist criminal act. Never mind the physical act of it. So this person clearly doesn't understand race relations. Moving forward, when we look at the whole picture, I can see the realities for me, I think there's structural racism in these existing communities. And just saying from Karbala to Minnesota, it's a good slogan. But what's happening is when you talk about Karbala, you're taking away from the voice of black people who are saying Black Lives Matters. Black people are saying that we of all the communities in America, in Britain, we suffer the worst in terms of police deaths, in terms of police brutality, in terms of the pigs using, the police, using our communities as an occupying force, a terrorist force to brutalize us in our communities. It's not happening to the other communities to the level it's happening to us. So what we're saying is that Black Lives Matter, support us on the Black Lives Matter slogan, but don't try and link it to Palestine and link it to other things. Because what we're saying is that for far too long, we've been supportive of all of your struggles, but then now it's your turn to support us. It's, oh, well, it's not an issue, is it? So when we say Black Lives Matter, not all lives matter. We know all lives matter. But in this particular case, a black man was lynched publicly. He had a man with his knee on his neck. It was seen worldwide. So we want support for this particular issue. Don't mix it up and don't wheel out so-called black scholars who for 15, 20 years have not said anything about this structural racism, have said nothing about the racism endemic within the Islamic community. So it's like you knowing a woman who's been beaten for 15 years by her husband, he finally kills her, and now you come out after you've seen all this being around the violence, seen him beat her up repeatedly, and say, oh, I'm against domestic violence. It's really wrong what this man did. Where was your voice for the past 15 years? So people like myself, in a group that I have called Islamic Action, for 30 years, I've been, and Brother Rizwan knows me, I've been actively saying, we need people in the community, the existing Islamic communities, the heritage Muslims, to get off the fence and start making structural changes. So for example, in the Khoja community, you have membership, but it can only be a Khoja. How are you going to have real change when you have a masjid that's run for the Islamic community? You have Eid, you have the big Eid day in the Khoja community at the end of the Eid day, and they invite all the community, black, white, whoever it is in the local community to come and take part in the festivities. But it's just an event. They're not making structural changes where, are you meeting those people daily, weekly? Are you involved in charity? Are you involved in like feeding them and doing things which daily show that you're not into prejudice? Some white brothers have become Muslim within 3 weeks. And they're already married to some of the Khoja sisters. Where some of the black brothers have been there for 15, 20 years. Not saying they want to marry a Khoja sister, not saying they're after your woman, but even the opportunity of brother, are you interested, not even passed to them. So there's a disparity when a white brother comes Muslim, Shia Muslim, and a black brother comes a Shia Muslim. They can't deny this. Now, I'm not sure it's because of what happened where the expulsion by Idi Amin from some of these West Africans, some of the Khojas in the West, some who came from Uganda, and maybe they're harboring a slight feeling of negativity because they had that. It was harrowing. They were just kicked out unlawfully, unfairly, and came with a claws on their back. Let's not deny that. But that's 30, 40 years ago. You have a chance now to heal those wounds, You see that black youth in the community are slaughtering themselves on industrial level. You see that black youth are crying out for guidance, crying out for Islam. Why is it left to the black Muslim brothers and sisters to go and reach them and give them dawah? Why are you not helping to support those social programs that can show? Because Prophet ﷺ, when he first did his prophet giving out his sermons in Mecca, Medina, he didn't talk about haram and halal for the first 13 years. He appealed to the best of the people and said, look, you know what I mean? There's people starving, there's people's poverty, there's ignorance. How can we address those issues? Don't you think there's a better world than this? Don't you think we can make a better community? Don't you think you can actively help to bring about a better society? He appealed to their better nature. And we are not doing this. We've lost the ball here. So it's easy to point the finger at America and England and all this other blatant racism, but we ignore the subtlety within our own self. As Brother Simon so eloquently said, the shibboleth within us, the apartheid that's within us, the looking down, the disdain. For example, if I quote Al-Kafi, Fil Furu, Book of Nikah, on the chapter whom I dislike for marriage, narration 1, in Al-Kafi, the Shia Hadith, which is seen as Sahih, it says, accordingly, Amir Br I'm supposed to have said, and I quote, beware of marrying the Negroes, in brackets the Zunj or the Zanj, close brackets, for they are an ugly creation, close quote. Now, if you have hadith like this within the books of Sahih, which is attributed to our Imam Amir Br, which he said black people are ugly and you shouldn't marry them, and scholars can see this and they know this and they turn a blind eye to it, can you understand the subconscious, subtle, pernicious manifestations of Islam, of racism that is happening? And when you see a person who's black, he automatically, like Pavlov's dog, you have this reaction.
Let me jump in there. I'm taking an inference, and I'm taking it correctly.
Your microphone's really bad. You need to sort it out.
Can you hear me? Are you hearing me?
It's still. Is it started to any of my brothers? Is it started to you as well, Simon and Rizwan?
Yes, it is started. Yes.
Yeah, you are. Maybe we got another phone on, or you're too close to the mic, but it doesn't sound.
Yeah. Can I just can I make a comment about the hadith in Al-Kafi, because it's important?
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, firstly, whatever books a hadith is found in, there is a general rule about all hadiths, that any hadith that is in clear contradiction with what the Quran, the Quranic principles are, or the practice of the Prophet, then that hadith is to be discarded. And as far as I can see, this hadith that you've quoted, to me, the Quran is very clear on many levels about unacceptability of racial discrimination. God doesn't do that. And the practice of the Prophet also is very clear in this respect. So I'm very, I would actually, in my view, I'm not a hadith scholar, but I wouldn't put much credit on that particular hadith that is seeming to suggest that race should be a criteria for selection of a spouse. And we know also from the practice of the imams, I think in the program that Sheikh Nur took part, there was a mention, I think it was one of the imams who had married an Ethiopian woman. I can't remember which imam it was, but that is also known. So all these things that any hadith we see, we suggest racial prejudice, I don't think we should take this seriously. I don't think there are lots of things. Just the same as we say in Sunni books, there are hadiths which are not valid or fake. In Shia books, it's the same criteria. We should not take anything that is very clear contradiction to the Quran as valid.
But the point he's making, though, is that it's a bit like closing the door to the stable, closing the stable door for the horses bolted.
Exactly.
It's a particular Pavlovian reaction in the community whereby these ideas have infiltrated in a subtle, discreet way, and we need to examine how they've done that, how these ideas have infiltrate and how we extract them, and that's
Yes.
not an easy job. So
No, it's not easy.
we
That's
do
right.
definitely need to expose, you know, bring these things into light so people can
Of course.
critically.
No, yeah, that is a valid point. There are things in our literature which need to be questioned. I mean, there are things. I mean, I read there's a sermon in Hajj Balaga which talks so badly about women. The women have half the intellect of men, and I can imagine that if we believe Imam Ali is infallible, that can be something that was returned from him, because that is clear contradiction of what the Quran actually says.
Well, that's a good point.
And am I saying, and does that make me, because I'm male, I'm better than Fatima, the daughter of the Prophet? I'm better than Zainab, the sister of Imam Hussein?
Every part of the world.
Sorry, brother, sorry, can I jump in? Because I think we've lost brother El Hajj.
Can you hear me? Is it better? Is it clearer?
I'm clear now, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I know what it was. I fixed a technical fault. What I'm aware of is that we've come to the end of this segment, and we would like to look at, in part 2, some solutions, and really going deep into some solutions. But that will be for the part 2. Sorry to cut your wisdom, but we have to pay, what do they say, pay the rent, and put a pause for the cause, so to speak. So this part 1 has been riveting, thought-provoking, and we've really lit the fire in terms of the intellectual conversation.
Absolutely.
We hope to see you on the other side. So for now, assalamu alaikum, rahmatullah ta'ala wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Simon?
Yeah.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.